The rifle shot echoed through the canyon just as Zelda Morgan's horse stumbled, sending her tumbling into the dust outside Rawhide, Arizona territory. And when she looked up through the settling dirt, a tall stranger was already dismounting to help her. His green eyes filled with concern rather than the mockery she had grown accustomed to back east. "Miss, are you hurt?" His voice carried a gentle authority that made her pause before scrambling to stand on her own, brushing the red dust from her traveling dress with hands that shook more from exhaustion than fear. The rifle shot had come from somewhere in the hills, likely hunters, but it had startled her already nervous mare. "I am perfectly fine," Zelda said, though her ankle throbbed and her pride stung worse. She had been traveling for 3 weeks from Boston, fleeing a life that had become unbearable after her father's business partner had tried to force her into marriage to settle debts she had not known existed. The West had seemed like freedom, like possibility, but now she stood in the middle of nowhere with a lame horse and no clear plan. The stranger caught her mare's reins, running a practiced hand down the animal's leg. "She will be all right, just needs rest. Name's Isaac Jennings. I have a ranch about 2 miles north of town." He looked up at her, and Zelda noticed the way the afternoon sun caught the dust in his dark hair, the honest openness in his face that seemed so different from the calculating men she had known back home. "Zelda Morgan," she replied, then added with more confidence than she felt, "I am looking for work in Rawhide." Isaac's eyebrows rose slightly. "What kind of work?" "Any kind," she said firmly. "I can read and write, I know my numbers, and I am willing to learn whatever else is needed." He nodded slowly, leading her horse as they walked together toward the cluster of buildings that made up Rawhide. The town was smaller than she had imagined, just a single main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a schoolhouse, and perhaps a dozen other structures scattered in the red dirt. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the bright blue sky. "The schoolteacher position was just filled," Isaac said thoughtfully, "but Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house might need help. She is getting on in years and the work is hard." Zelda nodded, trying not to let her disappointment show. She had been a teacher's assistant in Boston, had imagined continuing that work here, but she would take what she could get. "That sounds perfectly suitable." They walked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the crunch of their footsteps and the distant call of a hawk. Zelda studied Isaac from the corner of her eye. He was tall and lean, with the sun-weathered skin of someone who spent his days outdoors. His clothes were simple but clean, his boots worn but well-maintained. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel unexpectedly safe. "What brings you all the way from Boston?" Isaac asked, and she realized her accent had given her away. "A fresh start," she said simply, and was grateful when he did not press further. Mrs. Henderson, as it turned out, was a spry woman of perhaps 60 with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She looked Zelda up and down in the dim parlor of the boarding house, taking in her dusty traveling dress and tangled blonde hair. "Can you cook?" Mrs. Henderson demanded. "Yes, madam." "Can you clean?" "Yes, madam." "Can you change linens and do laundry and haul water and keep boarders from causing trouble?" Zelda hesitated only a moment. "I can learn." Mrs. Henderson's weathered face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "Honest, at least. Room and board plus $2 a week. You start tomorrow at dawn." "Thank you," Zelda breathed, relief flooding through her. She had exactly $8 left to her name, and the thought of having a place to stay and regular meals made her want to weep. Isaac, who had been waiting outside, smiled when she emerged. "Good news, I take it?" "I have a position," she confirmed, and returned his smile with a genuine one of her own. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Jennings." "Isaac," he corrected, And you are welcome. If you need anything, my ranch is just north of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction." She watched him ride away, leading her mare, which he had offered to stable and tend until the animal recovered. There was something about the way he sat his horse, easy and confident, that made her think he was exactly the kind of man who belonged in this wild country. The work at the boarding house proved even harder than Zelda had anticipated. She woke before sunrise to start the kitchen fire, prepared breakfast for 6 boarders, washed dishes, swept floors, made beds, hauled water from the well, scrubbed laundry, prepared lunch, cleaned the rooms, prepared dinner, and collapsed into her small attic room each night with aching muscles and blistered hands. But she did not complain. She had chosen this life, had run toward it rather than away from anything, she told herself. The work was honest, Mrs. Henderson was fair if demanding, and she was building something of her own. A week after her arrival, Isaac came to town for supplies and stopped by the boarding house. Zelda was hanging laundry in the backyard, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied back with a faded ribbon. She looked up at the sound of his boots on the hard, packed earth. "Miss Morgan," he greeted, touching the brim of his hat. "Mr. Jennings," she replied, though her eyes were laughing at the formality. "Isaac, I mean. Your mare is doing well. I thought you might like to know. Thank you. I have been meaning to come collect her, but the work keeps me busy from dawn to dark." "No rush," he assured her. "She is good company for my horses." He paused, then added, "I wonder if you might like to take a ride this Sunday after church. You could see the mare, and I could show you some of the country around here." Zelda's first instinct was to refuse. She had not come west to entangle herself with a man, had not fled one unwanted arrangement only to fall into another. But something in Isaac's steady gaze made her reconsider. This was not a demand or an expectation. It was simply an invitation, one she was free to accept or decline. "I would like that," she heard herself say. Sunday dawned clear and hot, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the desert floor. Zelda dressed in her best remaining dress, a simple green cotton that had survived the journey relatively unscathed, and walked to the small church at the edge of town. The service was unlike anything she had experienced in Boston, with its formal liturgies and rigid propriety. Here, the preacher spoke plainly about faith and hardship and gratitude, and the congregation sang with more enthusiasm than skill. Isaac was waiting outside after the service, holding the reins of 2 horses. Zelda's mare nickered in recognition, and she felt a surge of affection for the animal that had carried her so far. "She looks wonderful," Zelda said, running her hand along the mare's neck. "Thank you for taking such good care of her. Like I said, she has been good company." Isaac helped her into the saddle, and they rode out of town at an easy pace. The land around Rawhide was harsh but beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush and endless sky. Isaac pointed out landmarks as they rode, telling her about the ranchers and miners who worked the territory, the occasional trouble with rustlers or raiders, the way the seasons changed the landscape. "It is not an easy life out here," he said honestly. "But it is a good one if you can handle the hard parts." "I am learning that," Zelda replied. They had stopped near a small creek, letting the horses drink in the shade of a few scraggly cottonwoods. "Back in Boston, I thought I knew what hardship meant, but it was all so small, so confined. Here, everything is bigger. The work is harder, but it feels more real somehow." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That is why I came west. I grew up in Ohio, working in my father's dry goods store. It was a good life, steady and predictable, but I felt like I was suffocating. Out here, you can breathe." They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Isaac told her about his parents, both passed now, and his dream of building a ranch that could sustain a family. Zelda told him about her father, a kind man who had made poor business decisions and died leaving her at the mercy of his partner's schemes. "I will never let myself be dependent like that again," she said fiercely. "I will make my own way." "That is admirable," Isaac said softly. "But making your own way does not mean you have to do it alone." The words stayed with Zelda long after they rode back to town, after she returned to the endless cycle of work at the boarding house. She found herself thinking about Isaac at odd moments, remembering the sound of his laugh or the way he had looked at her with such genuine interest. Their Sunday rides became a regular occurrence. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they rode in comfortable silence, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Zelda felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. She had told herself she did not need anyone, did not want the complications of affection or attachment, but Isaac made her reconsider what partnership might look like. It was not about dependency or ownership. It was about two people choosing to walk through life side by side, supporting each other without diminishing either one. 3 months after her arrival in Rawhide, Isaac took her to his ranch for the first time. It was modest but well-maintained, a simple house with a wide porch, a sturdy barn and corrals that held perhaps 24 horses. The land stretched out in all directions, empty and full of possibility. "It is not much yet," Isaac said, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "But I have plans. Another year or two of good sales and I can expand the herd, maybe build a bigger house." "It is wonderful," Zelda said honestly. She could see what he had built here, the work and care that had gone into every fence post and water trough. "You should be proud." They stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Isaac cleared his throat, and when Zelda looked at him, she saw nervousness in his expression for the first time since they had met. "Zelda, I know we have not known each other long, but these past months have been the happiest of my life. I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to our Sundays together. I wonder if perhaps you might feel the same way." Her heart was pounding, but Zelda made herself meet his eyes. "I do," she admitted. "But Isaac, I need you to understand something. I do not know how to be what you might expect. I was raised to be an ornament, to manage a household and make polite conversation. I do not know how to be a partner, a true companion. I do not know how to be a wife." The last word came out almost as a whisper, carrying all her fear and uncertainty. She waited for him to withdraw, to realize she was not what he needed. Instead, Isaac smiled, reaching out to take her hand gently in his. "We will figure it out side by side." The simplicity of his response, the absolute confidence in his voice, made something tight in Zelda's chest finally release. She had been so afraid of failing, of not being enough, that she had almost talked herself out of taking the chance. But Isaac was not asking her to be perfect. He was asking her to try to learn and grow together. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I would like that." Isaac pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. They were married a month later in the small church where they had first attended service together. Mrs. Henderson cried, which surprised everyone including herself, and gave Zelda a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. The townspeople, who had watched their courtship with approval, turned out in force to celebrate. Zelda wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, working by lamplight after her long days at the boarding house. Her hands still bore the marks of hard work, calluses and small scars, but Isaac had kissed each one and told her they were beautiful because they represented her strength. Standing at the altar, promising to love and honor this man who had shown her what true partnership could be, Zelda felt a joy she had never imagined possible. This was not the life she had been raised to expect, not the comfortable Boston society wedding with hundreds of guests and elaborate formality. This was real and raw and perfect. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Zelda moved into Isaac's ranch house, leaving behind the cramped attic room at the boarding house. She woke each morning in their shared bed, still sometimes surprised to find him beside her, solid and warm and real. Learning to manage a ranch household was different from working at the boarding house. Here, she was not following Mrs. Henderson's instructions, but making her own decisions about meals and cleaning and the 100 other tasks that filled each day. She had to learn to cook on the temperamental wood stove, to manage their limited supplies, to handle the ranch hands who came by for work during busy seasons. And there were moments when she felt overwhelmed, when the weight of responsibility pressed down and she wondered if she was truly capable of this life. One evening, about 3 weeks after the wedding, Zelda burned dinner so badly that even the dogs would not eat it. She stood in the kitchen surrounded by smoke and failure, tears streaming down her face. Isaac came in from the barn, took one look at the situation, and simply wrapped his arms around her. "I cannot do this," she sobbed into his shirt. "I am terrible at this." "You should have married someone who actually knows how to run a household." "Hey, look at me," Isaac said gently, tilting her chin up. "You think I knew how to run a ranch when I started? I once left the gate open and lost half my herd, had to spend 3 days tracking them down." "We are both learning, Zelda. That is what life is, just figuring things out as we go. But you need someone competent, someone who can actually help you build this place." "I need you," he said firmly. "The woman who traveled across the country alone. The woman who works harder than anyone I have ever met. The woman who makes me laugh and challenges me and sees the world in ways I never considered. That is who I need. The rest is just details we will figure out together." His words soothed the panicked voice in her head, the one that insisted she was not enough and never would be. She took a shaky breath and nodded. "All right, but we are definitely opening a can of beans for dinner." Isaac laughed, and just like that the crisis passed. Slowly, day by day, Zelda found her rhythm. She learned that the stove cooked hot in the back right corner, so she had to rotate pots constantly. She learned that Isaac preferred his coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and that he had a sweet tooth he tried unsuccessfully to hide. She learned the names of all the horses, and which ranch hands could be trusted with delicate tasks, and which needed constant supervision. And Isaac learned about her too. He learned that she liked to read by lamplight before bed, that she had a fierce temper that flared hot and fast, but never lasted long. He learned that she was terrified of snakes, but would face down a stamping horse without flinching. He learned that she sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and that the sound made the house feel like a true home. They worked side by side, building their life together. Isaac taught Zelda to ride better, to rope cattle, to read the weather in the clouds. Zelda helped him with the ranch accounts, bringing order to his haphazard record-keeping, and suggested improvements to the house that made it more livable. 6 months into their marriage, a harsh winter storm hit Rawhide. Snow, rare in the Arizona territory, fell thick and fast, and temperatures dropped below freezing for nearly a week. Isaac spent long hours checking on the livestock, making sure they had shelter and water, while Zelda kept the fires burning and prepared hot food for his return. On the 3rd night of the storm, one of the pregnant mares went into labor. Isaac came in covered in snow, his face grim. "I need help. The foal is breech and I cannot turn it alone." Zelda did not hesitate, pulling on her heaviest coat and following him into the bitter cold. In the barn, by the light of several lanterns, they worked together to save the mare and her foal. Zelda held the mare's head, speaking soothingly while Isaac worked with skilled hands to turn the foal and guide it into the world. When the tiny creature finally emerged, slick and steaming in the cold air, Zelda felt tears freeze on her cheeks. The mare nickered softly, already cleaning her baby, and the foal struggled to stand on impossibly long legs. "We did it," Isaac said, wonder in his voice. He looked at Zelda, really looked at her, standing there covered in blood and hay and who knew what else, her hair escaping its braid and her hands shaking with cold and exhaustion. "You were amazing." "We did it together," she corrected, and he pulled her into his arms right there in the barn, kissing her with a passion that warmed her from the inside out. Spring came, melting the snow and bringing new life to the ranch. The foal they had saved grew strong and healthy, and Zelda declared she would never be sold. "She is our lucky charm," Zelda insisted, and Isaac did not argue. They named the foal Hope, and she became a symbol of what they were building together. Against the odds, against their own doubts and fears, they were creating something that would last. But life on the frontier was never simple or easy. In late spring, a group of cattle rustlers hit several ranches in the area, including Isaac's. They lost nearly a dozen head, a significant blow to their finances and their plans for expansion. Isaac rode out with some of the other ranchers to track the rustlers, and for 3 days Zelda waited at the ranch, rifle in hand, terrified that he would not come back. She had grown up in a world where violence was something that happened to other people, far away and not quite real. Here, it was immediate and personal. When Isaac finally returned, exhausted but unhurt, Zelda ran to him and held on so tightly he had to gently pry her arms loose so he could breathe. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "I am here. I am all right." He stroked her hair, feeling the tremors that ran through her. "We did not catch them, but we made it clear this territory is protected. They will think twice before coming back." "I do not care about the cattle," Zelda said fiercely. "I care about you. Nothing else matters." Isaac pulled back to look at her face. "We are partners, remember. Your safety matters just as much as mine. If something had happened, if they had come here while I was gone—" "I would have handled it," Zelda said, and meant it. She had discovered a core of strength in herself that she had not known existed back in Boston. The West had not made her hard exactly, but it had made her capable. The summer was busy with work. They hired 2 permanent ranch hands, young men named Thomas and William, who were hard workers and respectful to Zelda. She made sure they were well fed and treated fairly, and in return they were loyal to the ranch. Zelda also started a small garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. It was frustrating work, and many plants died in the intense heat, but she persisted. By late summer, they had fresh tomatoes and peppers and beans, and Zelda felt a ridiculous pride in serving vegetables she had grown herself. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaac reached over and took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said slowly. "We have been married almost a year now. The ranch is doing well, better than I had hoped, and I look at what we have built together, and I think it would be nice to share it with someone else." Zelda's heart skipped. They had not talked directly about children, though it was something she had thought about often. "You mean a family, if you want that too," Isaac said carefully. "I know it is not something we discussed before we married, and I do not want to assume." "I want that," Zelda said softly. "I am terrified of it, honestly. I do not know the first thing about being a mother. But yes, I want to have a family with you." Isaac's face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. "We will figure it out side by side, just like everything else." 3 months later, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one morning over breakfast, her hands shaking as she set down his coffee. "I think I am going to have a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her. Then he was up and around the table, pulling her into his arms with such joy that she laughed through her tears. "Are you sure? When? How are you feeling?" "I am reasonably sure. Probably early summer based on my calculations, and I am terrified and excited and nauseous most mornings." "This is wonderful," Isaac breathed, one hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the heat of the summer made everything worse. But Isaac was endlessly patient, bringing her water and crackers, taking over more of the household chores, holding her hair back when she was sick. Mrs. Henderson came out to the ranch regularly, bringing supplies and advice. "You are doing fine, girl," she said briskly when Zelda expressed her fears. "Plenty of women have done this before, and you are stronger than most." As her belly grew, Zelda found herself marveling at the changes in her body, the way this new life was making itself known through kicks and movements. She would sit on the porch in the evenings, one hand on her stomach, and talk to the baby about the life that awaited them. "Your father is the best man I have ever known," she would say. "He is strong and kind, and he will teach you everything important. And I will do my best to be a good mother, even though I have no idea what I am doing. We will figure it out together." Isaac would often join her, his hand covering hers, feeling the baby move. "I hope they have your courage," he would say, "and your determination. Those are the things that matter out here." When Zelda's time came in early June, it was sudden and intense. Her water broke while she was hanging laundry, and within hours the contractions were coming hard and fast. Mrs. Henderson arrived with practiced efficiency, sending Isaac to pace on the porch while she helped Zelda through the labor. It was the hardest thing Zelda had ever done. Hour after hour of pain, of pushing and struggling and wanting to give up. But Mrs. Henderson was there, and between contractions, Zelda could hear Isaac's voice through the window, praying and encouraging her. "You can do this, Zelda. You are the strongest woman I know. Just a little more, love. You can do this." And finally, as dawn broke over the desert, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the sudden change in circumstances. Mrs. Henderson cleaned him quickly and placed him in Zelda's arms, and she looked down at the tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is beautiful," she whispered. Isaac came in, looking exhausted and elated, and knelt beside the bed. "A son," he said wonderingly, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. Small fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at this new person they had created, Zelda said, "What about James?" "It was my father's name." "James Jennings," Isaac said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little man." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming. James needed to eat constantly, and Zelda was still recovering from the birth. She felt inadequate and emotional, crying at odd moments over nothing. One night when James would not stop crying no matter what she did, Zelda broke down completely. "I cannot do this," she sobbed to Isaac. "I do not know what he needs. What kind of mother does not understand her own child?" Isaac took James from her arms, bouncing the baby gently. "The kind who is still learning like the rest of us. It has been 3 weeks, Zelda. Give yourself time." "But what if I am not good at this? What if I fail him?" "You will not," Isaac said firmly. James had quieted in his arms, making small snuffling noises. "You know why? Because you care too much to fail. Yes, it is hard now. Yes, we are both exhausted and have no idea what we are doing half the time. But look at him, Zelda. Look at our son. He is healthy and loved, and that is what matters." Zelda wiped her eyes, looking at James's tiny face. He had started to look more like Isaac, with the same shaped eyes and determined chin. "You are right. I just wish there was an instruction manual." "That would take all the adventure out of it," Isaac said, and she laughed despite herself. Slowly, they found their rhythm as parents. Zelda learned to read James's different cries to anticipate his needs. Isaac walked the floor at night when the baby was fussy, singing old songs in his off-key voice that somehow always worked. They took turns being exhausted, supporting each other through the hardest moments. The ranch work continued, though now it was complicated by the presence of a baby. Zelda would often carry James in a sling while she worked in the garden or prepared meals. The ranch hands doted on the baby, and even the taciturn Thomas would break into a smile when James grabbed his finger. As James grew, he became the center of their world. His first smile, directed at Zelda while she fed him, made her cry with joy. His first laugh, prompted by Isaac making silly faces, became a sound they would do anything to hear. When James was 6 months old, sitting up and showing interest in everything around him, Zelda realized she was pregnant again. She told Isaac one evening after they had put James to bed. "Already?" Isaac said, surprise and joy mingling in his voice. "That was fast." "I know. I am sorry. I know it is sooner than we planned, but sorry," Isaac interrupted. "Zelda, why would you be sorry? This is wonderful news." "But James is so young, and I am barely managing as it is, and what if—" Isaac silenced her with a kiss. "What if we have 2 healthy children who grow up close and loving? What if we have twice the joy in this house? We have done this before, remember? We know a little more now. And we will figure out the rest." Side by side, Zelda finished, and let herself believe it. This pregnancy was easier in some ways, harder in others. The morning sickness was not as severe, but chasing after an increasingly mobile James while pregnant was exhausting. Isaac hired a woman from town, Sarah Mitchell, to come out twice a week to help with the heavy housework and watch James so Zelda could rest. Their daughter was born in early spring, 2 months before James's first birthday. The labor was faster this time, and by mid-morning, Zelda was holding a tiny girl with a surprising amount of dark hair. "She looks like you," Isaac said softly, touching the baby's cheek. "She looks like herself," Zelda corrected, but she was pleased. They named her Emma, after Isaac's mother, and she proved to have a much calmer temperament than her older brother. Life with 2 young children was chaotic and exhausting, and more fulfilling than Zelda had ever imagined. She would sometimes stop in the middle of folding laundry or preparing dinner and just marvel at what her life had become. 3 years ago, she had been running from Boston with no plan and no hope. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, 2 beautiful children, and a home that was truly hers. But the challenges of frontier life continued. When James was 3 and Emma 2, a drought hit the territory. Months passed with barely any rain, and the rangeland turned brown and brittle. Water became precious, and they had to make difficult decisions about the livestock. Isaac sold off some of the herd at poor prices, trying to keep the strongest animals alive. He rode out every day checking the water sources, digging deeper into the creek beds, hauling water when necessary. Zelda watched him grow leaner and more worried, the stress aging him in ways that broke her heart. "We will make it through," she told him one night as they lay in bed. The children were finally asleep, and they had a rare moment of quiet. "We have before." "This is different," Isaac said, and she could hear the fear in his voice. "If we lose too many animals, if the drought continues into next year, I do not know if we can recover. Maybe we should consider selling the ranch, moving somewhere with more reliable water." "No," Zelda said firmly, sitting up to look at him. "This is our home. We have built something here, Isaac. We have a family, we have a life. I am not giving up, and neither are you." "But if we cannot, we will find a way," she interrupted. "Maybe we need to think differently. What about drilling a well? Or changing what livestock we raise? Or finding additional income somehow? There are always options if we are willing to look for them." Isaac pulled her back down beside him, holding her close. "How did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," she said, kissing him. "Someone once told me we would figure things out side by side. I'm holding you to that." They did find solutions, though none were easy. Isaac took on some work breaking horses for other ranchers, dangerous work but well paid. Zelda started taking in sewing, using skills her mother had taught her to alter dresses and mend clothing for the women in town. Every dollar was carefully saved, stretched as far as possible. And when the rains finally came in late fall, soaking the parched earth and turning the desert green, they stood together on the porch and watched the water pour from the sky. Emma toddled between them, laughing at the rain, while James splashed in the growing puddles. "We made it," Isaac said quietly. "We did," Zelda agreed. "Together." The years passed, bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a serious boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. Emma was more interested in books and learning, and Zelda taught her to read by the time she was 4, when James was 6 and Emma 5. Zelda gave birth to twin boys, Matthew and Luke. The surprise of twins sent Isaac into a panic, wondering how they would manage 4 children, but Zelda just laughed. "We have been managing chaos for years now. What is a little more?" The twins were easier in some ways, content to play with each other, harder in others, as they seemed to inspire mischief in each other that neither would have attempted alone. The house was loud and busy and full of life. Zelda had long since stopped worrying about whether she knew how to be a wife and mother. She had learned by doing, by making mistakes and correcting them, by asking for help when she needed it and trusting her instincts. She was not perfect, but she was exactly what her family needed. The ranch prospered over time. Isaac's reputation for quality horses spread, and they began getting orders from farther away, even from army posts and other territories. They expanded the house, adding more bedrooms and a proper dining room. They hired more permanent help, people who became like extended family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Zelda on a trip to Tucson, their first time away from the ranch since their honeymoon. Sarah Mitchell and Mrs. Henderson, who had moved into a cottage on the ranch property when she finally retired from the boarding house, watched the children in Tucson. Isaac bought Zelda a beautiful locket and chain. Inside, he had placed tiny photographs of their 4 children. "10 years ago, I met a woman in the dust outside Rawhide," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "She was proud and scared and determined, and I fell in love with her almost immediately." "I was a mess," Zelda protested, but she was smiling. "You were beautiful. You are beautiful. And every day I wake up grateful that you took a chance on me." "On us," Zelda corrected. "We took a chance on each other, remember, and look what we built." That night in their hotel room, they made love with the passion of new lovers and the comfort of old friends. They knew each other's bodies as well as their own, knew how to give and receive pleasure, knew that their connection was about far more than physical desire. "I love you," Zelda whispered in the darkness. "I never knew I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Isaac admitted. "You are my partner, Zelda, my best friend. My home." They returned to the ranch to find controlled chaos. Mrs. Henderson reported that Matthew had gotten stuck in the chicken coop, and Emma had taught herself to play a simple tune on the old piano in the parlor. James had been a perfect gentleman, she said with approval, and Luke had only tried to run away twice. Sounds about right, Zelda said, scooping up the twins and covering their faces with kisses while Emma showed off her piano skills and James recounted everything that had happened in solemn detail. As the children grew older, the family dynamics shifted again. James, at 12, started taking on more responsibility with the horses, showing the same natural talent his father had. Emma, at 11, announced she wanted to be a teacher and began helping at the Rawhide School. The twins, now 6, were just starting their formal education and proving to be complete opposites despite being identical in appearance. Zelda found herself with slightly more time and used it to become active in the community. She helped organize a lending library in town, using books donated from families across the territory. She also began teaching basic literacy to some of the ranch hands and their families, holding classes in the barn on Sunday afternoons. Isaac watched her teach one day, seeing the passion in her face as she helped a young cowboy sound out words in a battered primer. When the lesson ended, he pulled her aside. "You are remarkable," he said. "Do you know that?" "I am just sharing what I know," Zelda protested. "You are changing lives. You are giving people opportunities they would never have otherwise. That is remarkable." She kissed him then, in front of anyone who cared to see, no longer the uncertain girl who had worried about being enough. She had grown into herself out here in the wild country, had become someone strong and capable and confident. When James was 16, he asked if he could start working with a horse trader who traveled the territory. It was good money and would let him see more of the West, but it meant being gone for weeks at a time. Zelda's first instinct was to say no to keep her firstborn close, but she knew that was not fair. "What do you think?" she asked Isaac that night. "I think he is growing up," Isaac said carefully. "I think we raised him to be independent and capable, and now we have to let him be those things." "I hate it," Zelda admitted. "I hate the idea of him being out there where I cannot protect him." "I know. But he is not asking for permission. Not really. He is telling us he is ready, and I think we have to trust that we prepared him for this." So James went, and Zelda cried the night he left even though she had been nothing but encouraging to his face. Isaac held her and let her grieve the end of one stage of their son's life, understanding that this was just the first of many letting goss they would face as parents. Emma, meanwhile, had become involved with the young schoolteacher in Rawhide, a serious young man named Peter who clearly adored her. At 15, she was too young for a formal courtship, but Zelda could see where things were heading. "We should probably start preparing ourselves," she told Isaac. "In a few years we will be planning a wedding." "At least Peter is a good man," Isaac said. "And he clearly has excellent taste in women." The twins were developing their own paths. Matthew showed an interest in ranching like his father and older brother, while Luke was fascinated by the mining operations in the mountains and talked constantly about geology and precious metals. One evening, when all 4 children were gathered around the dinner table arguing cheerfully about nothing in particular, Zelda caught Isaac's eye across the table. He smiled at her, and in that smile was everything they had built together, all the years of hard work and love and commitment. After dinner, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Zelda leaned against Isaac's shoulder. "Do you remember the day we met, when I fell off my horse and you helped me? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Isaac said. "Covered in dust and too proud to admit you were hurt. I told you I did not know how to be a wife," Zelda said softly. "I was so scared of failing, of not being enough. And I told you we would figure it out side by side," Isaac finished. "And we did." "We did," Zelda agreed. "We really did." The years continued to pass, bringing more changes. James returned from his travels at 19 and announced he was ready to start his own horse breeding operation on a piece of land adjoining the family ranch. Emma married Peter when she was 19, in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Rawhide. The twins graduated from school, Matthew immediately joining his father and brother in the ranch work, while Luke headed to California to study mining engineering. Zelda and Isaac found themselves entering a new phase of life, one with fewer children underfoot but more grandchildren on the horizon. Emma gave birth to a daughter when she was 20, and the joy of holding her granddaughter made Zelda understand her own mother in new ways. "This is what it was all about," she said to Isaac, rocking baby Sarah while Emma rested. "All the hard work and sleepless nights and worry, it was building toward this." Isaac, now in his 50s with silver threading through his hair, pulled her close. "And we did it together." They had expanded their holdings over the years, carefully investing their profits in land and livestock. The ranch that Isaac had started alone was now a family enterprise, with James and Matthew working alongside him. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, had dealt with rustlers and market crashes and personal tragedies, but they had survived it all. One morning, Zelda woke to find Isaac already up, standing at the window looking out over their land. The sun was just rising, painting everything gold, and she could see their world spread out below. The house they had expanded together, the barns and corrals, the horses grazing in the pasture, the mountains in the distance. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Everything," Isaac said simply, "all of this. I was remembering that day I found you in the dust and thinking about how different my life would be if I had just ridden past." "But you did not," Zelda said. "You stopped, you helped, you saw me." "Best decision I ever made," Isaac confirmed. He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. 25 years, Zelda. 25 years of marriage, and I love you more now than I did the day we wed. Because now you know about my terrible temper and my tendency to burn dinner when I get distracted," Zelda teased. "Because now I know everything about you," Isaac corrected. "The strength that you do not see in yourself. The way you love our children so fiercely it makes my heart ache. The way you have never given up, not on me, not on this ranch, not on the life we are building. I love you for all of it, every single part." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, he could still make her feel cherished and seen. "I love you too. You taught me what partnership really means. You showed me that I could be strong and still ask for help, that I could be independent and still choose to build a life with someone else." They stood there in the golden morning light, two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other through all the challenges life had thrown at them. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. Later that day, the family gathered for Sunday dinner, a tradition they had maintained even as the children had grown and scattered. James came with his wife Maria, a rancher's daughter he had met on his travels, and their 3 children. Emma and Peter arrived with their 4 children, including baby Sarah. Matthew brought his new fiancée Charlotte, and even Luke had made the trip from California. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. Zelda moved through the chaos, making sure everyone had enough to eat, settling minor disputes between cousins, soaking in every moment. This was what she had wanted without knowing she wanted it. A family, a legacy, a home. After dinner, as the adults sat on the porch while the children played in the yard, James raised his glass. "To Ma and Pa," he said, "for showing us what real partnership looks like, for building something that will last for generations." "To Ma and Pa," the others echoed, and Zelda had to wipe her eyes. "Stop," she protested. "You are all going to make me cry." "You cry at everything, Ma," Emma said affectionately. You always have. That is because I am happy, Zelda said. So wonderfully, completely happy. Isaac reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. No words were needed. They understood each other perfectly after all these years. As the sun set over the Arizona territory, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Zelda thought back to that frightened girl who had arrived in Rawhide so long ago. She had been running from one life and had found another she had never imagined. She had been afraid she would not be enough, would not know how to be what was needed. But she had learned, step by step, mistake by mistake, success by success. She had learned that being a wife was not about being perfect, but about being present. That being a mother was not about having all the answers, but about showing up with love every single day. That building a life was not about knowing the destination, but about choosing the right partner for the journey, and she had chosen well. They both had. Years later, when Zelda was in her 60s and Isaac in his late 60s, they took a trip back east. It was something they had talked about for years but never done, always too busy with the ranch and the family. But with James and Matthew running the operation smoothly, and the grandchildren mostly grown, they finally made the journey. Boston had changed, but it still felt foreign to Zelda. The crowds and the noise and the confined feeling she remembered were all still there. They visited her family's graves, and she told Isaac stories about her parents, about the life she had left behind. "You ever regret it?" he asked as they stood in the cemetery. "Leaving all of this?" "Never," Zelda said immediately. "This was not really my life. It was what was expected of me, but it was never truly mine. The life I have with you, that is real, that is mine, that is us." They stayed in Boston for 2 weeks, seeing the sights and marveling at how much the country had changed in the decades since they had left. But they were both eager to return home, to the wide open spaces and the clear air and the life they had built. On the train ride back, Zelda dozed against Isaac's shoulder, and he looked at her with the same affection he had felt that first day. Her hair was silver now, her face lined with years of sun and laughter and hard work. She was more beautiful to him now than she had been at 20, because now he knew the full measure of her strength and character. She woke to find him watching her and smiled. "What?" "Just thinking about how lucky I am," Isaac said. "We both are," Zelda corrected. "Lucky we found each other, lucky we took the chance. Lucky we figured it out side by side," Isaac added, and she laughed. "That too." They returned to the ranch to find it thriving. James and Maria's oldest son, Isaac Jr., was now working full-time with the horses and showing the same natural talent his grandfather and father had. Emma's children were scattered across the territory, some ranching, some teaching, one even studying law. The twins had both married, Matthew to his longtime love Charlotte, and Luke to a woman he had met in California named Ruth. Zelda and Isaac settled into a gentler pace of life, no longer responsible for the day-to-day running of the ranch, but still involved and valued. They spent their mornings on the porch, their afternoons visiting with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, their evenings remembering and dreaming. One evening, as they sat watching yet another spectacular sunset, Isaac said, "You know, I have been thinking about something you said the day I proposed." "Oh, that was a very long time ago. You said you did not know how to be a wife," Isaac said. "And I have been thinking about all the ways you proved yourself wrong over the years." "I had a good teacher," Zelda said softly. "No," Isaac corrected. "You had courage and determination and love. Those were always in you. I just got to witness them." "We taught each other," Zelda decided. "That is what partnership is, after all, learning and growing together." "Then I say we succeeded," Isaac said. "Look at what we built, not just the ranch or the family, but the life we have lived, the choices we made, the way we loved each other." Zelda leaned against him, perfectly content. "We did succeed. We figured it out side by side, just like you promised. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat," Isaac said. "Even the parts where I burned dinner or lost my temper or made mistakes. Especially those parts," Isaac confirmed. "Because those are the parts where we learned. Those are the parts where we became who we are." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence. There was nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. They had built a good life together, had raised good children, had created something that would outlast them both. Years passed with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived. Isaac's health began to decline when he was in his 70s, his body finally showing the wear of decades of hard ranch work. He moved more slowly, needed more rest, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Zelda never wavered. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch. There were children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now. Dozens of people whose very existence was testament to the choice Zelda and Isaac had made so long ago to build a life together. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, and Zelda wore a new dress that Emma had sewn for her. Isaac stood straight and proud despite his age, and when he repeated his vows, his voice was strong and sure. "I, Isaac, take you, Zelda, to be my wife, my partner, my best friend, my love. For the rest of my days and beyond, I choose you. I, Zelda, take you, Isaac, to be my husband, my partner, my best friend, my love. For the rest of my days and beyond, I choose you." The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and music and dancing. Zelda was pulled from one conversation to another, embraced by children and grandchildren, all of them wanting to share their love and gratitude. But it was the quiet moment at the end of the night when everyone had finally gone home or to bed and she and Isaac sat alone on the porch that she treasured most. 50 years, she said wonderingly. Half a century. Best 50 years of my life, Isaac said. Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, Isaac confirmed. Those were when I saw your true strength. Those were when I fell in love with you all over again. Zelda wiped her eyes, emotion overwhelming her. "I do not know what I would do without you." "You would do what you have always done," Isaac said gently. "You would keep going, you would love our family, you would live fully. That is who you are, Zelda. That is who you have always been." Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later with Zelda beside him holding his hand. He was 74 and they had been married for 52 years. His last words to her were simple. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for the life we built. Thank you for loving me." The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight that pressed down on Zelda's chest and made it hard to breathe. For 52 years, Isaac had been her partner, her best friend, her love. Now she had to learn to exist in a world without him, but she was not alone. Her children surrounded her with love and support. James moved back into the ranch house to make sure she was never by herself. Emma visited daily, bringing food and comfort. Matthew and Charlotte took over more of the ranch operations, and even Luke came home from California for several months. Slowly, day by day, Zelda learned to live with the grief. She would sit on the porch in the evenings in the spot where she and Isaac had spent so many hours and talk to him. She told him about the grandchildren, about the ranch, about the memories that surfaced at unexpected moments. "I miss you," she would say to the sunset. "Every moment of every day I miss you, but I am so grateful we had the time we did. I am so grateful you chose me and I chose you and we built this beautiful life together." One evening, about 6 months after Isaac's passing, young Isaac Jr. came to sit with her. He was 19 now, so much like his grandfather in appearance and manner that it made Zelda's heart ache. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "How do you know when you have found the right person? When you have found what you and Grandpa had?" Zelda thought carefully about her answer. "Your grandfather once told me that we would figure things out side by side, and that is what we did for over 50 years. So I suppose my answer is that the right person is someone who is willing to figure things out with you, someone who sees you as a partner, an equal, someone who makes you want to be better while loving you exactly as you are." Isaac Jr. nodded thoughtfully. "There is a girl, Maria's cousin Anna, and when I am with her, I feel like I could do anything. Like together we could build something amazing." "Then she might be the right person," Zelda said gently. "But take your time, get to know her, make sure you are choosing each other for the right reasons. Like you and Grandpa did." Exactly like that. Watching her grandson walk away, Zelda felt a sense of peace. The love she and Isaac had shared was not ending with his death. It was continuing through their children and grandchildren, rippling outward in ways they could never have imagined that day they met in the dust outside Rawhide. Zelda lived another 12 years after Isaac's death, surrounded by family and love. She was active until the end, still teaching reading to ranch hands, still maintaining her garden, still telling stories to the great-grandchildren who came to visit. When she finally passed away at 86, peacefully in her sleep, the entire town of Rawhide mourned. She had been a fixture in the community for over 60 years, had touched countless lives with her kindness and strength. At her funeral, James stood to speak, his voice thick with emotion. "My mother taught us many things," he said. "She taught us the value of hard work, the importance of education, the power of determination. But most of all, she taught us about love. She and my father built a partnership that weathered every storm, that grew stronger with every passing year. They proved that with commitment and compassion and willingness to figure things out together, two people can build something that lasts not just a lifetime but generations." He paused, looking out at the crowd that filled the church and spilled out into the yard. "When my mother first came to Rawhide, she was afraid she would not be enough. She told my father she did not know how to be a wife, and he told her they would figure it out side by side. And they did. They built a ranch, they raised a family, they created a legacy. And now it is our turn to carry that forward, to remember what they taught us, to build our own lives with the same courage and commitment they showed." Emma spoke next, sharing memories of her mother's kindness, her fierce protection of her children, her endless capacity for love. Matthew talked about her strength and resilience. Luke spoke about her curiosity and her willingness to keep learning throughout her life. And then young Isaac Jr. stood, now a man of 31 with his own wife and children. "I want to tell you all something my grandmother told me when I was 19, he said. "I had asked her how to know when you have found the right person, and she said the right person is someone who will figure things out with you, someone who sees you as a partner, someone who makes you want to be better while loving you exactly as you are." He looked at his wife Anna, holding their infant son. "I found that person, thanks in part to my grandmother's wisdom. And I hope that someday I can tell my son about his great-grandparents, about two people who took a chance on each other and built something beautiful." Zelda was buried beside Isaac on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their graves were simple but well-maintained, always covered with fresh flowers brought by family members. The inscription on Zelda's headstone read, "She figured it out, side by side with the one she loved." Years passed, and the ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants. The original house was expanded and updated but never replaced, kept as a connection to the past. The barn where Zelda and Isaac had saved hope during that winter storm was now a historic landmark, preserved exactly as it had been. And every year, on the anniversary of Isaac and Zelda's wedding, the family would gather at the ranch for a celebration. They would share stories of the couple who had started it all, would remember the lessons they had taught, would renew their own commitments to partnership and love and figuring things out side by side. Because that was the real legacy Zelda and Isaac had left behind. Not just the land or the buildings or even the bloodline, but the understanding that love is a choice you make every day. That partnership means showing up even when things are hard. That you do not have to be perfect or have all the answers, you just have to be willing to try. On that day when Zelda had tumbled from her horse in the dust outside Rawhide, she had been running from a life that was not hers. She had been afraid and uncertain and desperate for something different. And Isaac had stopped to help, had offered her kindness when she expected nothing. From that simple act of compassion, an entire legacy had grown. A ranch that employed dozens of people. A family that stretched across multiple generations. A love story that became legend in the small town of Rawhide. Told and retold to prove that happy endings were not just fairy tales, but something you could build with your own hands if you were brave enough to try. And it all started with a woman who did not know how to be a wife and a man who smiled and said they would figure it out side by side. Together, they had built something that would last forever, a testament to the power of choosing each other day after day, through all the joys and sorrows that life brought their way. Their love had started in the dust of an Arizona afternoon, and had grown into something that would never truly end, living on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. The ranch they built still stands, the family they created still thrives, and somewhere in the sunset over the Arizona territory, two spirits sit side by side on a porch, watching over the legacy of love they created together, content in the knowledge that they did indeed figure it out, every step of the way, exactly as promised.